Today, we're talking everything pools.
Yes.
We're with Denis McMillan with Sunshine Fun Pools, so let's go. If you're enjoying this video, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. We want you to let us know your comments about what you think about our videos and what you want to hear more. We're excited about talking about this video, about everything you need to know about pools.
Pools, yes.
And we help you find the right place at the right time right here.
If you're enjoying today's video, please hit that like button and subscribe and leave us a comment. Let us know what you think.
All right, Denis, appreciate having us over here.
Thanks for the opportunity. We appreciate that.
Absolutely. Why don't you introduce yourself a little and tell us about your company?
Happy to. I'm Denis McMillan, work with Sunshine Fun Pools. We're a local pool builder that's been around since 2005 here in the Bryan College Station area. I've been with the company almost 10 years. I do sales, design, marketing, business development, quite a few other things. Wear a lot of hats in the company.
Yeah, sounds like it. Always busy, right?
Yes, sir.
So we're actually out here at your pool.
We are. This is my personal pool.
Yeah, and we wanted to talk about what do people need to consider when they decide they want to build a pool, whether it's an existing home, whether it's in the homes in the build process and they want to add the pool. When should they reach out to you? Is sooner better? And what are the first considerations?
Okay.
Is it terrain? Is it?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that we have to take into consideration. So if it's a new home build and someone is working with a home builder for the architectural plans, then we want to be involved as early in the process as possible. Whether the pool is built as part of the new construction or whether the pool is built after the home closes. And we have both of those scenarios that we work with quite a bit. The reason we want to be involved early is, as you mentioned, every home site's going to have a little bit different terrain. Yeah. It's very rare that we deal with very flat properties. And so that has to be a consideration, and that's one of the considerations we took in here. The earlier we're involved with that process, we can coordinate with the home builder if he's doing the pad site for the foundation of the home. If the homeowner is wanting that pool to be at the same elevation as that back patio, then they can extend that pad site. And that's kind of all part of that original design. If they do have some elevation change and they want some steps or some transition down to a pool in a lower area, then of course we can plan for that at that point as well. The second consideration when you're working with new home construction is once the home is framed and the builder is running all of the electric and plumbing and everything for the home itself, if we know where the equipment's going to be and we know our equipment requirements, then we can have the home builder stub out our power, our gas, any water requirements, anything like that at the equipment pad. Gotcha. And that's a much easier process than coming in after the home is built and we've got the main over here, but the sub panel is going to be over here and we've got to figure out how to trench it or run it through the attic or whatever we've got to do to get the utilities over to the equipment pad for the pool. So,
okay.
Yeah.
See, I didn't even think about any of that. So.
It actually saves the homeowner a ton of money at that point too, because it's much less expensive for that home builder to be able to set that equipment.
Yeah. Now, do you ask for a survey or do you survey yourself to understand the parameters that you can get the pool in?
That is a fantastic question. Yes, as early in the process as possible, we do want to get a copy of the survey. And what that survey is going to show us, it's going to show us the building setbacks. If we're in a municipality that's not going to allow us into a setback, then obviously that restricts the space that we have to build in. Setbacks are one of those things that, because pools are subterranean, there are certain municipalities that will allow us to build in that setback. Most of those setbacks are related to sightline issues. In other words, a workshop or a study or a mother-in-law suite or something that's going to have a above ground elevation that's more visible. A lot of times those setbacks are going to pertain to that as opposed to a pool, which again is subterranean and not in view. But the biggest thing that we have to look for with the surveys is the utility easements, drainage easements, any sort of easement that may be present. In some of the older neighborhoods, we may be looking at aerial electric lines. There's always going to be an easement for aerial electric lines that we have to consider as well. And it's typical with the easements, they're typically no-go zones. Setbacks, we got a little bit more of a fluidity there, but easements, whether they're drainage, utility, aerial, or whatever, are going to be no-go zones and kind of restrict what we can do with the footprint of the pool.
Gotcha. Now you're talking about easements in older neighborhoods and things like that. You've got a beautiful live oak tree here, but some of these, they already have trees in their backyard, things like that. Yeah. How do you deal with root systems and all that fun stuff?
So obviously if there are trees located where we're going to build the pool, then they've got to come out, and we'll excavate as much of the root system as we possibly can, and those guys are gone. We try to keep a perimeter around the pool. We typically will look at a pool's drip line. And a drip line by definition is when it rains, the furthest extending branches are going to drip water. Okay. Typically, the rule of thumb is that a root system is not going to outgrow the drip line.
Gotcha.
And so the old adage where we've got as much tree below ground as we do above, that's kind of how we get to that rule of thumb. Now, if it's an older, mature tree, then yeah, we can consider that drip line. In this case, we built this pool 10 years ago. This was a much smaller tree at that point. Right. And so while we did factor that in, we've had some growth and we've had to do some trim backs and things of that nature. You'll often hear that root systems will grow through a pool. The pools that we're building, 8 to 10 inch thick gunite walls. I'm not saying it never happens, but I haven't ever seen a personal case of a root actually penetrating a gunite pool wall. So, yeah. But that's typically how we handle the trees in the neighborhoods. And yeah, sometimes it's kind of sad to see some of those 70, 80-year-old oak trees have to go down. But we're making room for something beautiful.
There you go. There you go.
The other thing that we look at too, Jeff, is a lot of times we'll have elevation change. Okay. And here we've got about 4 foot of elevation drop. And once upon a time, before the pool was in, we had kind of a disjointed patio system with lots of different levels. Had plenty of square foot, but it wasn't really functional,
right.
for tables and that sort of things. We never had one area that was without steps and that sort of thing.
Right.
So it was really interesting when we built this pool, we actually elevated the entire structure of the pool out of the ground so that we could set the coping level with the fresh pool patio that we poured here, and actually did an overlay under the covered area so that everything flowed and gave us a lot of usable space.
Now this is the coping here?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay.
And then the other cool thing that elevation does as we transition over to the back, you can kind of tell that the lounge area that we have on the back side of the pool is at a lower elevation, so you kind of get some steps down. So anytime architecturally you can involve different levels and different elevations with your patio, with your pool, with the raised spas, anything like that, it just adds a little bit of that extra architectural interest, and it's kind of fun to play with.
Yeah, and I like how that the fire pits are higher.
Yes, sir.
At night you get a little higher elevation.
Get a little elevation with that. It's really a cool look at night.
Have a reflection in the pool. And
absolutely. Speaking of the reflection, the lighting that we're using in all these pools is low voltage LED. The brand that we use is called the Hayward Color Logic LED light. And what's really neat, it's a sealed LED panel. And so the old days of having a big white light at the end of the pool, thankfully those are gone. So we're using low voltage LED now it's capable of that white light, but it'll also give you your shades of blue, your shades of purples, reds, greens. The controllers have integrated light shows that will fade through various colors at different speeds.
Okay.
And when you mention at night, those LED lights, the reflectivity up underneath the tree canopy is really cool.
Oh, wow.
So it kind of gives you kind of a party effect.
Yeah.
Throw a little fire feature in there and
that's cool.
Kind of turns it up a little.
Yeah, that's great. So we talked about, getting in early with the building process, especially if you're building a home so that they can get all the lines together and things like that. But as a consumer, where do they need to start? Is it their ideas coming to you with design saying, we want a hot tub, we want this, we want that, or is it something else?
Yeah, Jeff, a lot of times it's a collaboration. It's a combination of both.
Yeah.
When we decided we were going to build our pool, I've got a brother-in-law that lives in Austin. He built a beautiful white limestone with waterfalls and that sort of thing. We've got some friends here in town that went deep with the rock formations and the towering falls and grottos and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so we had some inspiration to draw from. And honestly, when we went through the process, we got on house.com and started going through all of the pools.
Yeah.
And you're exactly right, the inspirational photos. Until we found something that wasn't our neighbors, wasn't my brother-in-law's, was unique, that was drawn to us. And so we started very simply with some concept photos.
Gotcha.
And so when I started working with Sunshine on the design, it was very simple. It's like, We wanted a free-form pool, which by definition has more curves to it than what we call a geometric in the industry, which is a combination of 90 and 45-degree angles. And we chose a free-form, just personal choice. There's no other reason. And we talked about concept photos. And the neat thing about our company, we have a software program. It's AutoCAD compatible, and it's called Pool Studio. What we do when we go on site, the first thing that we do when we're visiting with a new client is schedule an on-site meeting. Okay. Because as designers and builders, we have to look at things like utility location. We have to look at the trees that we talked about. We have to look at the changes in topography, and then try to pair all that with what the customer is desiring. Is it a pool only? Is it a pool spa? Do we need to factor in shallow sun shelf areas for sunbathers or pets or young kids? Are we doing deep for diving, or are we doing relatively shallow for social type interaction? And so we gather that feedback, and then we start working with that software. And we mentioned the survey. Mm-hmm. We'll take that survey, we'll lay that in the background of our software. We'll scale everything up, we'll draw the house in, we take photographs, we try to replicate the existing space as accurately as we possibly can before we ever start designing and drawing in the pool. Right. And so then if we have some concepts and some photos based on our conversations with the client, we're gonna put together a really awesome design. The software is sophisticated enough that we can show the changes in the topography. And so they can actually visualize how much of that pool is going to be out of the ground on one end, or how much is going to be in the ground. What kind of transition do we have with the steps and the patio? And so having the two-dimensional images is important. Obviously, that gives us our dimensions and where we can build and all that. Right. But the magic really happens when we hit the 3D button. So then we've got full color 3D imagery of what we've designed, paired with how meticulously we've recreated the backyard and the home space. And that's really where the vision that we have transfers over to the consumer. Oh, great. Kind of like building a home, you know, you start with a blueprint. Yep. And that blueprint's going to get changed. Yeah. Maybe once or twice, maybe we start over. Right. But typically with our designs, once we can sit down with the client, sit in the showroom, show it to them on the big screen TV in full color, and kind of make that vision come to life, then they can kind of begin to see it evolve. And so if there are changes, we need to shift the size of the pool, or add some depths, or change some depths, or move the spa or the sun shelf, or whatever we need to do, that becomes a collaborative effort. Gotcha. And so just a few tweaks here and there, and next thing you know, we've got a pool designed. Okay.
So when it comes to the design, I would imagine the preference of water doesn't make a difference, but it probably makes a difference with the equipment that you're going to install.
Fundamentally, yeah. So when we're talking about the types of sanitation, first thing that I tell clients, there's no such thing as a chlorine-free pool. Every pool is going to have chlorine in it. Chlorine is the preferred choice to control biologicals. It's why our municipal water districts put chlorine in their distribution system. We want to keep everything safe and healthy and clean for all the consumers. Right. And so it becomes a question of, where does the chlorine come from? Okay. And so that brings up the question, do we do a saltwater pool, or do we do a traditional chlorinated pool? Okay. Well, when you think about salt, molecular composition is sodium chloride, right? Right. And so in a saltwater pool, we're essentially taking food grade salt, dissolving it into the pool until we get a certain salinity level. Okay. As that salt water rotates through our filtration system, it goes through a salt cell generator, and through the process of electrolysis, that molecular bond is shattered, and it allows that chloride to then be free of the sodium. That chloride then becomes your chlorine. Okay. So pros and cons. The folks that have the salt chlorinators, or the salt cell generators for chlorination on the pool, because it's self-generating, right, you don't have to watch that chlorine level quite as much as if we're manually putting in the slow dissolving pucks, or the liquids, or the granulars. Yeah. At some point, there's a certain amount of that salt that becomes consumed. Okay. And so now we have to go back in with another 40-pound bag of food grade salt and get that parts per million of our salt up high enough so that the generator can create the chlorine levels. And so folks like that, because there's typically less monitoring of your chlorine. Right. You still have to monitor your pH, your alkalinity, metal content, things of that nature that may be in the water, but at least you have a constant chlorine source. The drawbacks, well, it's a salt cell generator. You know, it's another piece of equipment that we have to pay for that has to go onto the equipment pad. The life expectancy of a salt cell generator with regular maintenance, 5, 7, maybe 10 years if you get really lucky, and then we'll have to end up replacing that. So there can be a recurring cost associated with that.
Okay.
But the argument for that is that, well, I'm not having to go out and buy 50-pound buckets of tabs every year.
Right.
And so those costs essentially over the long haul kind of balance out, and it begins to be personal preference.
So essentially, if you had someone who had an existing pool, but they wanted to switch over to saltwater, they could do that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
There's a few material considerations that we have to take into account. If someone comes to us and it's a new build, maybe they've had a saltwater pool before and they want to do the salt again, then there's certain materials we kind of want to stay away from. I use some natural limestone on this particular pool.
Right.
Limestone and saline water don't necessarily get along the best, so we might want to venture into something a little more durable, like a split-face travertine or some porcelain tile or some things of that nature. So,
Gotcha.
but outside of that, it's a good option.
Cool. Great. So it seems like everything's advancing these days.
Yes,
so let's talk about advancements in pools themselves.
Absolutely. So typically pool advancements are all related around efficiency and low maintenance, right?
Okay.
Nobody wants to spend hours maintaining their pool. And so what we've done at Sunshine, we put a few more pieces of equipment on our pool specifically to try to lower the maintenance involved.
Okay.
And I'll give you a couple of quick examples. Every pool has to have skimmers, right?
Yep.
The purpose of the skimmer is to get that matter that's going to float off the surface of the pool as quickly as possible.
Right.
Nothing easier than emptying a skimmer basket. We always do a minimum of 2 skimmers for that purpose.
Okay.
Any of the debris that's actually going to sink to the bottom of that pool, most of the time you'll see a pool that has the sieve covers over the drains. We actually use an open channel under drain, and that open channel will allow small pieces of leaf and debris matter that gets down to the bottom of the water column to be entrained into that filtration system.
Gotcha. Okay.
In advance of the pump, we have a product called a leaf vac. It doesn't really vacuum anything, but what it is a strainer basket, a large strainer that catches that debris that's going to go through the bottom of that pool. So it never does get to the pump and the filter system. So a few advanced filters that we have. Once the water flows into the pump, all the pumps nowadays are variable speed.
Okay.
And so variable speed versus single speed, a single speed pump is either on or it's off.
Gotcha.
And when it's on, it's running wide open and it's just sucking electricity.
Yeah.
A variable speed pump is actually designed to run 24 hours a day. It runs very slow, low, quiet. Your pool is constantly circulating.
Okay.
If it's constantly circulating, it's constantly skimming, and we're constantly catching that debris that may sink down to the bottom of the pool.
Gotcha.
So it doesn't eliminate the need for a vacuum, but it greatly reduces it.
Yeah.
Speaking of vacuums, there are robotic cleaners now,
Okay.
both corded and cordless, that folks can plug in and drop into the pool. So you kind of get away from the old days of having to get the hoses and the poles and vacuum all the stuff out that goes straight to the filter system.
So with those constant pumps and things like that, does that help maintain the pH level better than having it go on and off? Or are people still checking using the little beakers? And
Yeah,
things like that?
there's some folks that still prefer the beakers and the drops, but as far as simplicity's sake, the advancements of test strips has been fantastic over the past 10 years.
Yeah.
When test strips first came out, they were a little wonky, but and you could get more accurate readings with the old beakers and drops. But nowadays the test strips are equally as accurate, and it's just step into the water and compare some colors and see what you need to adjust on the chemistry side. So
I remember doing all that as a kid, and then having to shock the pool if you had to shock the pool and all that fun stuff.
Absolutely.
So, we mentioned older pools.
Yeah.
Do you do work on older pools?
We absolutely do. It's actually a growing segment of our business. It's a growing segment of the pool industry as a whole. And the reason's very simple. People built pools 30, 40, 50 years ago, 20 years ago. And, a pool like a home, at some point, there's going to be some maintenance, some upkeep, whether it's required or whether you're just trying to update the kitchen. You want to update the pool.
Right.
You get staining and mineral buildup on waterline tiles. Maybe you used a natural stone on the first pool and you're just kind of wanting to change the look and make it modern and updated. Typically remodels are much quicker, much faster than new construction because we're not having to build a pool. We're just simply kind of resurfacing.
Okay.
Primarily when folks come to us and are asking for remodels, they're wanting to redo the plaster, which is the interior of the the pool. The pool may be at an age where when they installed it, they just did the old white marble-based plasters.
Yeah.
And now there's a wide variety of colors and textures with materials from PebbleTech, Pebble Sheen, Stonescapes, Wet Edge, and the modern plasters are much more durable. They're composed of a high percentage of fine, very highly polished pebbles.
Okay.
That's where the name PebbleTech actually came from. They were the pioneers of that technology. And those pebbles are sourced from all over the world.
Okay.
They come in different colors. You can combine them with a binding agent that can either be non-colored or colored.
Okay.
And that creates some of the pools that you see in the magazines that are a darker blue to an almost black.
Gotcha. So that's the
interior surface of the pool. Absolutely. And so you can change a pool's look by simply doing a replaster. Plaster involves, of course, draining the pool.
Yeah.
We typically chip out and remove the old plaster, but then we can come in immediately, put in the new plaster, begin the fill, balance chemistry over the course of a couple days, and you've got a whole new look to the pool. The other things that folks typically will look at is the coping, and we mentioned the coping. This is that lighter travertine color, and it's basically the perimeter of the pool. And then our waterline tile, which is actually the transition underneath that coping and the plaster itself. And so the waterline tile gets its name because that's typically where the waterline is, and it's that transition. And so simply by changing it to, you know, smaller rectangles, I believe these are 1x2 on this, to a 6x6, 2x4s. There's glass tiles, there's porcelain tiles, and any color of the rainbow you can imagine. So,
and that's a quick update.
It's pretty quick. Yeah, again, we're draining the pool down a certain level. If we're just doing tile and coping and then leaving the plaster, we don't actually have to drain the pool the whole way.
Okay.
We'll knock it down about 6 or 8 inches below the waterline tile.
Right.
And then it's carefully removed so as not to disturb the plaster.
Yeah.
And the guys can come back in, get the tile and coping redone, and kind of overnight, you've got a brand new look and an updated pool.
That's great. So we talked about LED lighting.
Yes, sir.
We talked about like fire pits, hot tubs, the shallow pads, which for tanning.
We call them a sun shelf. You'll hear them
sun
called
shelf.
tanning ledges or Baja ledges, things of that nature.
What else is in a trend right now for stuff like that?
We've tried to design our pools with a lot of bench space.
Okay.
People want to be able to sit and relax in their pools.
Right.
And when the pool is brand new, you know, it's new and exciting through years 1, 2, 3, however long.
Right.
And then at some point, it's like, man, I really wish we'd have done a bench on this end. You know, maybe this end of the pool gets used all the time. That end of the pool doesn't. You know, as designers, we have to think about that going in.
Gotcha.
And so we try to create gathering areas in the pool, multiple areas for folks to be able to utilize the whole pool for the long term.
Gotcha.
And
well, as kids get older, their preferences change too.
They do.
So instead of splashing around just right here, they want to be over in the deep end.
That's it.
Okay. Gotcha. Well, hey, appreciate your time today.
Man, I appreciate y'all coming out.
We've learned a lot. Yeah, and we may be hitting you up for more questions here soon.
That sounds good.
All right.
I'm always available.
Yep. Thank you.
That was a fabulous video.
Did you like it?
I did. I was actually obviously not in this one, and it was great to sit back and just watch it and listen. And I learned so much about pools.
So much to consider.
Yes,
I mean,
Dennis did a great job of explaining different aspects of it and things to consider and all about pools.
From the terrain to the setbacks to utilities.
And options and
yeah.
how things have changed. And his pool is lovely.
Isn't it? It's gorgeous.
It's a very serene place to be.
Yeah.
He might come home one day and be like, why is that woman sitting in my backyard? It's lovely.
Well, it's a great video. You know, I think it will help people buy new homes, people with existing homes. So thank you to Dennis, and really want to thank you for watching. And just remember, we've helped people just like you find the right place at the right time.
Right here.